Hi guys, I am here with your final exam review. Before we get started, I just want to highlight a few things. Last week we put out a review worksheet for you. It had about 17 topics to look at, take notes on, to help you prepare for the exam. You can also look at knowledge reviews or any worksheets that you have, like the pressure volume density worksheet, the medical chart, the travel rules, and of course, review your hand signals. Now is not the time to go back and reread your textbook or start reading it for the first time. Don't do that. Your best bet is to use those tools that I just talked about and also this video. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Mrs. Murphy and myself. I cannot emphasize that enough. We are here to help you. You should not take the exam if you still have questions. Make sure that you talk to us first. And last but not least, let me just remind you that if you would like to get your scuba certification, you need to pass this exam with a 75% or higher, which is 38 or higher out of 50. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. I made a PowerPoint for you. Well, actually, it's for me so that I don't forget anything. So here we go. Buoyancy was one of the first topics we covered in the semester. Remember that positive buoyancy means you are floating. Negative buoyancy means you are sinking. Neutral buoyancy means you are neither floating nor sinking. You're somewhere in the middle, which is where we would like to be as scuba divers. It's important to know that salt water weighs more than fresh water. So you are going to be more buoyant in salt water than in fresh. So for those of you that have difficulty in our pool, it should become easier for you once you hit the ocean. Pressure, volume, and density. This is actually probably the hardest portion of the test, and you'll encounter it within the first 12 questions. So make sure you really review this well. The exam is going to have questions that gives you scenarios regarding your lungs, or the balloon, and the tank, which they liken to a glass. So think back, as you descend, what happens to the air inside your lungs? Well, those air molecules move closer together, which means they become more dense, and the volume gets smaller. What happens to the air inside your lungs when you ascend? As you ascend, air molecules move apart, which means they become less dense, and the volume becomes bigger. This is why we need to remember that #1 scuba rule: never ever hold your breath. If you hold your breath and you ascend, you risk rupturing your lungs. You're going to need to know how much the air reduces in volume per atmosphere. It does reduce every 33 feet. So chapter 1, find those charts, please review them. You're also going to need to be able to figure out how long a cylinder or tank will last. For example, if a cylinder will last 30 minutes at the surface, how long will it last at 33 feet? How long will it last at 66 feet? Well, if a tank will last 30 minutes at the surface and you go down to 33 feet, the volume reduces by half. Therefore, you cut your time in half, and the tank will only last you for 15 minutes. Similarly, if you have a tank that lasts 30 minutes at the surface and you go down to 66 feet, at 66 feet, the volume reduces by 1/3. 1/3 of 30 minutes is 10 minutes. That would be a pretty short dive. Proper care of equipment. This, we really stress this in the pool usually when we're handling all of the equipment. It would be really important to pay attention to these things once you start owning maybe your own pieces of gear. Actually, even if you're renting from someone, you really should abide by these proper steps and return it in good form. So after using BCDs, we rinse them in fresh water after each use, and then we hang them to dry. For those of you that have been part of the cleanup crew, you know that we have to empty water out of the BCD. We blow it up, we empty it out. We blow it up again, we empty it out. And then we blow it up a third time and hang it for storage. That way, when it dries, the bladder doesn't get stuck together. Got to leave a little bit of air inside. Let's talk about regulators. The first bullet point there is actually something that we often forget to talk about, and that's because we do things a little bit differently in our pool. Our alternate air sources usually are just hanging footloose and fancy free, right? That's really not the best practice. The best practice would be to clip them up. The clips are expensive though. However, you should clip them up, and the best place to position the alternate air source while you're diving is in a triangular area between your chin and the lower corners of your rib cage. We keep the alternate air source there for two reasons. It's going to keep it from getting damaged. You know, when it dangles, it could potentially be damaged by hitting it against stuff. So it could keep from getting damaged, but then it's also just a primary location where your buddy can find it should they need it. So again, best place for an alternate air source to be while diving is on a clip in a triangular area between your chin and the lower corners of your rib cage. Once you're done using the regulator, you need to rinse the mouthpieces in fresh water, hang it to dry, and keep it out of the sun. The tanks also need to be stored out of the sun, and they all need to have air in them. By keeping some air in the tank, you prevent moisture from getting inside. If moisture were to get inside, the inside of the tank could start to corrode and you'd start to breathe in that crap, and that is not good. So always have a little bit of air in the tank. Tanks need to be visually inspected once a year, and then they need to be hydrostatically tested every 5 years. Regulator parts. I've listed the regulator parts for you, but also included a picture. This will be a matching question on the exam. The first stage, located right here, is the part that attaches to the tank. The second stage of the primary is also known as the mouthpiece. You can tell that this one is the primary because it is black and it is the shorter hose. This is the one that the diver breathes from. The second stage of the alternate can be identified differently because it is on a longer hose and it usually is yellow in color. So again, both of these are referred to as the second stage, also mouthpieces. One is the primary that belongs to the diver, and the alternate, which could be used by your buddy in the event of an emergency. We have the low pressure inflator hose, which connects to the BCD that allows you to put air inside your BCD to help you control your buoyancy. And then you have your submersible pressure gauge or computer, also known as the instrument console. As you know, once you hit the water, things are affected a little differently than on land. Sound travels faster, and therefore, because it travels faster, it's hard to tell where it's coming from. When you look at things underwater, they're going to look a little bit different. They will seem closer to you than what they will appear, or than what they actually will be, and they will appear larger than what they actually are. And last but not least, wetsuit. It's going to change once you are jumping in the water. and going down deeper. That wetsuit is going to compress, so it'll feel thinner than it actually is. And eventually you will lose warmth. Remember, a wetsuit has a layer of water between your body and the suit. Your body warms the water, but as you descend, it compresses and kind of squeezes that layer that you just warmed out, which is how you get a little colder. And you'll also lose buoyancy as you go. Dive flags. There are dive flag laws and they vary from place to place. What's important to know is that basically anytime there's a diver in the water, there should be either a flag flying from a boat or a surface float in the water. Unless dive flag laws state otherwise, the general procedure would be for a diver to stay within 50 feet of the dive flag or float. And boats should stay 100 to 200 feet away from divers that may be underwater. Hand signals. Now would be a good time to pause this video and go have someone quiz you to review all of your hand signals. Remember, there's a 2-page spread. I think it's in chapter 1. What do you do? In the following scenarios, there will be some questions on each of these. What do you do if you're separated from your buddy? Well, you search for 1 minute and then ascend. Hopefully, you both end up happily at the surface. What do you do if there is a current? If there is a current on your dive while you are underwater, you should start the dive heading into the current. This would make you do a little bit more physical work than is typical. And then when you turn around to go back towards the boat or your exit point, you wouldn't have to do so much work because the current would be pushing you from behind. It's a little bit different if the current is at the surface, however. If you are at the surface and the current is at the surface, you would need to inflate your BCD and then head across the current. You don't want to swim against it because it will be too hard and you would tire and probably end up in distress. And you don't want to swim with it because you would end up too far away from the boat. So at the surface, in a current, you would go across it. The next 3 bullet points are in yellow because you've seen these before. You've actually seen them on quiz 3, and it was a matching question. You had to match the low to out of air scenario with your response. So if you're running out of air or out of air and close to your buddy, your response would be to share air with them. If you are out of air and your buddy is too far away, but you're within 30 feet of the surface, then you're going to do a controlled emergency swimming ascent. If you are out of air and your buddy is too far away and you are deeper than 30 feet, then you have to do what's called a buoyant ascent, which means you are dropping your weights. Remember, this is your last option. What do you do if your regulator begins to free flow or release air continuously? I think most of you got to experience this in the pool, but if your regulator begins to free flow, you would tip your head to the left and fish hook the regulator out the right side of your mouth, and it will allow you to take sips of air off of it while you made an ascent. You would have to end your dive because you'd be losing air quickly, but you would still be able to breathe from the free-flowing regulator as long as you did not seal your lips around it. Okay, so tilt your head to the left, position the mouthpiece so that it is half in and half out of your mouth, and take sips of air from it. What do you do if you have an injured diver out of the water and not responding? In this scenario, you're going to check to see if they're breathing. That's the first and most important thing. Okay, decompression sickness. As a reminder, when you're breathing compressed air underwater, it's a combination of oxygen and nitrogen. Your body uses the oxygen, but it does not use the nitrogen. So, when you have decompression sickness, it's because your body can't eliminate the nitrogen as fast as it's coming out of your body tissues, and bubbles end up forming in different places in your body. The factors that increase your risk of decompression sickness include being cold, being tired, thirsty, or being sick. Okay, those will increase your risk of decompression sickness. If you think you have decompression sickness, what should you do? Do not go back in the water. The first thing you should do is contact emergency medical care and breathe 100% oxygen. Now would be a good time to also go back and look at the signs and symptoms. They can be found in your book or on the medical chart. Nitrogen narcosis. Well, nitrogen has an intoxicating effect as you go deeper. So most likely, nitrogen narcosis is going to occur on dives when you are diving at a depth of 100 feet or greater. It may or may not affect you. In itself, it is not harmful. It is what you do under this influence that could be harmful. If a diver begins to act foolishly, what you need to do is help them ascend to a shallower depth. And then you can really continue your dive. The effect should diminish and there should be no after effects. Contaminated air. Breathing contaminated air is actually rare, and it would happen most likely as a result of a problem with the compressor or the filtering system on the compressor. So the best thing you can do to try to avoid this is have your tanks filled at a reputable dive center. And then make sure you do a pre-dive safety check before every dive. Do not use the tank if the air inside tastes bad or smells bad. And again, just a reminder, this is a very rare scenario. Dive computers. This is also a little bit of a difficult topic just because we don't use dive computers in class. However, they are being used fairly readily out in scuba world, so you do need to know about them. The first thing you should do when you buy your own computer or rent one is read the instructions for use. You also should not share. Each diver should have their own computer. Do not turn the computer off between dives. It needs to be able to calculate repetitive dives correctly, and it can't do that if it's turned off. If you exceed your computer's limits, it's important that you follow the computer's instructions for decompression. Remember, the computer's instructions trump all rules. If your computer fails during a dive, then you should follow proper diving safety protocols to end the dive, which means you should ascend to 15 feet, take a safety stop at 15 feet for 3 minutes, and then proceed to the surface, ending the dive. Dive tables. You can use your dive table for the final exam. Fortunately for you guys, you will not have to do any more dive table problems per se. The questions on the exam will be about the rules, and the rules are located on the back of the table at the bottom if you haven't memorized them already. All right, you're almost there. The exam is 50 questions. It's mostly multiple choice and a few matching. Please take your time. Read through every answer. There is only one right answer per question. And remember, you have to pass with a 38 or higher to get certified. Well, that's it. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Mrs. Murphy or myself before you attempt taking this exam. We really want you to do well and pass it the first time. Remember, that's 75% or higher, 38 or higher out of 50. You guys can do this. You are almost done. Good luck.